I am going to go out on an inference and pretend to know what you're thinking. You're probably looking at your map right now that you have drawn. You see the colored ATS routes, the Navigate routes, the Lima routes, the Metroplex routes, different colors of color pencil, pen, maybe even markers, little labels, mileages, and it looks like a complete mess. It doesn't look like anything a pilot would want to navigate by, and it certainly doesn't look like a chart you would want to make reference to in an air traffic control mindset. But there's good news. Our mission is almost completed. This is the home stretch. We saved the easiest thing for last. And look at today's title card, the Mighty Mikes in November Rain. And yes, we are talking about the Mike or M airway route structure, high altitude routes that go into New York Center's airspace, into San Juan Center's airspace. And some of these Mikes, they even last and go to other air navigation service providers that boundary San Juan FIR. So this is exciting, a universal concept of Mike and the one lowly November that we kind of took from another airway. It's going to be really exciting. Happy you guys are spending some time with me today drawing the map, finishing the map for all intents and purposes. So that is exciting enough. So let's get down to it. Let's get to the sector. Let's take a look at the map and let's start tracing. Steve here. Welcome back. Let's get to it. Keeping in line with the other PowerPoints, you'll see that I am no longer in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. If you look to the top left-hand corner or to the northwest corner, you will see we have the Mike 525, this being our first airway, so you'll see the airway labels here. We have our handy-dandy PowerPoint furnished laser pointer to help us fixate our eyes and start the tracing process. You'll notice that the Mikes blend pretty well with the Lima airway route structure. We might even comment on where common intersections lie. These RNAV waypoints will serve as intersection points for some of the Lima airways going north and south. And that's very helpful because you will see how airlines file a combination of the Mikes and the Limas as they make their way through and in and out of the San Juan FIR. So without further ado, Mike 525, you want to fixate your eyes here in the southwest here by the Santo Domingo FIR, and we will see our first boundary fix of Ilamo. You'll get very well familiar with this fix because more often than not, Santo Domingo will try to attempt a radar handoff, a manual radar handoff, prior to or just at Ilamo. And it's always good to be able to know where that common point is where they continually or in a serial manner make those handoffs. So Ilamo, first fix that lies outside our airspace, to a boundary fix called Maya, which you guys are pretty much familiar with, green 633 being the culprit there. Between Maya and this random RNAV waypoint here on the west side of the island of Puerto Rico is a fix called Layla. Between those two fixes is 34 miles. A very short hop from Layla is a fix called Vachi, and there's only 12 miles between those two fixes. It goes out and runs out a little further to a fix called Panmo. Panmo being a very interesting fix because we've covered it not only with Lima 454, but this is one of the few instances where the Metroplex routes actually blend into a common point. I mean, there's other examples, of course, but this one's most notable because it's a true Yankee airway that terminates at Panmo, Yankee 292, if you remember, from FIPEC. And then from Panmo, aircraft can go bi-directionally on Lima 454, which is also what Panmo lies across. So you see how it's set up a perfect transition point for that. As we go further, well, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's remember that there is 68 miles between Vachi and Panmo. Between Panmo, we're going to go out a little further, not too much, to a fix called Frat. And there's 31 miles between Frat and Panmo. And if you remember, Frat is a nice fix that lies on Lima 456, very useful there. Going even further to a fix called Cafe, there's 72 miles between those 2 points, and Cafe is useful because there is the intersection of Lima 459. Continue on, we go to a fix. You guys are familiar with this from Lima 461, Yayo. And if you remember, Yayo is the namesake, or at least part of the namesake, of the Yayo Nadu fixed posting bay at Sector 4 in San Juan Center. So Yayo there, the mileage is 74 miles. Keep it going to the boundary fix, Soco, 39 miles. And definitely on the map, it's not too far away, and depending on the radar preferential settings where they have the map centered, you might even be able to have the last fix that lies, or the first fix that lies outside of San Juan's airspace going northeast bound to Zabor. A fix that you'll get familiar with too, because more often than not, as a D side, you will definitely understand that there are traffic situations that occur at Zabor, because not only is Zabor on Mike 525 going northeast or southwest, but remember, the airway, the Lima airway that makes up and goes northbound to Zabor is Lima 462. So we have an intersection that lies just outside of our airspace. So we would understand why sometimes New York Center will deny, based upon a very simple mathematical equation of plus times, to understand that there might be conflicts at Zabor, depending upon if aircraft are going both directions, or an aircraft going southeastbound and northeastbound, they'd be right at the odd altitude, and you might have to protect for Zabor, or definitely New York Center will protect for it. So let's go in reverse order. Zabor, SoCo, 39 miles to Yayo, 74 miles to Cafe, 72 miles to Frat, 31 miles to Panmo, 68 miles to Vachi, 12 miles to Layla, 34 miles to Maya, and of course, stopping at Ilamo. Very good. Mike 525, everybody. A very interesting instance here in Mike 576. This is probably the newest mic that we have had installed in the San Juan FIR, and it actually served as a one-for-one replacement of an ATS route. People will make reference to the old ATS route. It was known as Amber 516 or Amber 516 or Alpha 516, and it was in fact an ATS route. It was served by NavAids, and it was very useful, and it made up a great thoroughfare to facilitate traffic going southwest and northeastbound and cutting across San Juan Center. And you'll notice that the first couple mics that we cover, they almost perfectly go diagonal. As we see, we already discussed how intersections are made with the Limas, and you see how these airways facilitate traffic going to Europe northeastbound or coming from Europe southwestbound, and they parallel each other. So it's really interesting. So fixate your eyes down here to the southwest, and we're going to go with Mylock to a fix called Rias. You should remember this one from Lima 456. 33 miles lie between those two fixes. Raffi, you guys know this one from Lima 452, and 35 miles lie between Raffi and Rias. We have Anner, the namesake of the Alaska Anner Bay, or the Alaska Anner Strip Posting Bay for Sector 8. 11 miles lie between those 2 points. We go out a little further to a fix called Porquet. Porquet being familiar to us with Amber 555. 77 miles lie between those. A short distance away is the fix Dandy, and we have gotten to know Dandy pretty well with Green 633 and Yankee 280. Then 29 miles lie between those. Reaching out to the St. Martin VOR, and the St. Martin VOR is a staple in terms of being a NavAid that emits the colored ATS route. Blue 520 comes to mind as one, and there it is, St. Martin. Red 760 also comes to mind, Amber 638. So lots of airways there, and there's 45 miles between those two fixes. And then on the boundary of St. Martin Terminal Control Area and San Juan Center, if you're thinking of the airspace as vertically stratified, a fix called Manolo. 29 miles lie between those. Between Manolo and a fix called Nadu, therein lies 53 miles. Nadu being the second namesake of that fixed posting bay in Sector 4, the Yayo Nadu Bay. So that's where that gets that name from. And you can see when you put the Mike airways and transpose them with the Lima airways, you can do a very thorough traffic search. Not all encompassing, of course, but a very efficient and thorough traffic search and find common points of intersection. Here, St. Martin serves to be one of those. Yayo serves to be the other, because you have Lima 461 existing here. And then here you have Lima 462, and as you're going to see, we are not going to stop there. We're going to go a little bit further into New York Center's airspace, and you see how and why it's important to have traffic fades because of the traffic surge that will take place when you look at your flight progress trips. Nay, due to a fix called O-bike, which we have covered before in the Lima airway route structure. And though it is not depicted, well, there's 31 miles between those two fixes, it continues to a fix called Arcadia. That is the first fix that lies outside of San Juan Center's airspace. It should be known that the reference of Amber 516 still lives on because Mike 576 starts at Mylock. It does not continue into Mike Atia's airspace, but in Mike Atia's airspace, it still exists as Upper Amber 516. And Upper Amber 516 does, in fact, start at Mylock, if you want to think about it that way. It's start and stop point, and it goes all the way to Papa Juliet Golf, or the Curacao VOR. And there's a fix that lies just inside of our airspace. You see this faint triangle right here? Well, that's Ilmit, and you might remember Ilmit from Lima 337. So even though the name has not caught up with the updating through other FIRs, you should know that Mike 576 kind of lives on as Upper Amber 516, or vice versa, really. In San Juan Center's airspace, we designate it as a Mike, but it is basically, for all intents and purposes, it is the prodigy of Amber 516. So let's go over that one more time. Arcadia to O-bike. O-bike to Nadu is 31 miles. 53 miles to Manolo, 29 miles to St. Martin, 45 miles to Dandy, 29 miles to Porquet, 77 to Anner, 11 to Rafi, 35 to Rias, and 33 to Mylock. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Mike 576. Mike 597, how exciting. And if you were to guess where would another airway fit, as it makes this wonderful diagonal pattern, well, yeah, this area is kind of barren. I guess you can argue straight over the island is kind of barren, but if you think about all the airways that we have that emit off Scapa, the Lima 327s and 335s, that area is rather redundantly covered, but here, kind of barren. So let's fixate our eyes yet again in the Santo Domingo FIR, and let's cover the first fix. Pixar, just like the movie company that makes all the wonderful Disney classics, to a fix called Batir. From Batir, goes to Poya, where it intersects Yankee 355, one of those blending points of Yankees and Mikes, coincidentally. 95 miles lie between those 2 points. A very short hop away is Janma, 13 miles. From Janma, it goes to a fix called Thank, and there's 84 miles that lie between those 2 points. And then Thank goes to a fix called Kika. And Kika, remember, Lima 459, so a lot of blending going on here with the Lima and the Mike structure, as alluded to in the previous slide, with 64 miles lying between those 2 points. Depending upon your R side or even your preferential settings when you set up your display, you might be able to see and have available to you the first fix that lies outside of San Juan FIR's airspace, and that would be Cunepa. So just remember, Cunepa, Kika, 64 miles to Thank, 84 miles to Jamma, 13 miles to Poya, 95 miles to Batir, and the first fix is Pixar that lies outside. And it should also be noted that this airway is designated as a Mike, and it lives on, I believe, after Punta Calcedo, which this fix actually does go, this airway actually does go through. And after Punta Calcedo, it is an Amber airway, Amber 319. Fun fact for you, Amber 319 will take you all the way to Panama, take you to Tocumen, and that's where the airway kind of terminates. So interesting fun fact there as well. So remember, Pixar Batir, 95 to Poya, 13 to Janma, 84 to Thank, 64 to Kika, and there it goes to Cunepa. And that is Mike 597. Here is another example of how we designated an older ATS route and updated it to reflect and to be up to par with performance-based navigation routes, in this case, a Mike. So we used to have an airway called Amber 300, and it still exists in Mike Atia's airspace, as most of the colored airways do, but we decided to replace it with a nice techno-filled Mike 423, a new designator, and an interesting airway. Does not fit the mold of going diagonally across. It kind of goes diagonally across in the other way, so more of a northwest to southeast kind of flow. It does extend well beyond San Juan Center's airspace. It's a very impressive airway. It goes very far down into South America. So let's take a look here. Interesting enough that it does not start at a boundary fix. It does start just inside of San Juan Center's airspace at Lent. And Lent being a point, Lima 455 most notably, where aircraft can join at Lent and make their way up to the east coast of the continental United States. Then we go to Pling. So this facilitates, you will see when we cover the domestic map, a way for aircraft to make their way from the oceanic part of San Juan FIR into the domestic part, as denoted by that circle there. There's 78 miles between those two fixes. Then a very long stretch to Rias, and there's 268 miles to Rias. We've covered Rias, as you see before, with Mike 576. We changed Rias to the kind of olive green that you're looking at now. And then Kuiper. And then a little point there with 37 miles lying between those to note that it extends to the end of the screen, and it goes to a fix called Itala. It's bidirectional and a very useful airway at that. So remember, Lent, 78 miles to Pling, a nice stretch 268 miles to a fix called Rias, 37 to Kuiper, and then onwards to Itala. Vice versa, Kuiper, 37 miles to Rias, 268 miles all the way to Pling, 78 miles to Lent, and that is Mike 423. And now we bring ourselves to November 779, the odd November out of all these mics. And we easily could have put it in with the Limas. It really did not fit into the Metroplex or the colored ATS routes, so this is a bit of a wild card. But since it was close to the alphabet, we figured we'd roll it up into the mics. So take a look down here, south of San Juan's airspace. And we start at Armour. You know Armour from Lima 458 and Lima 337. So there's some PBN properties, if you will, to this airway. It does, in fact, extend well beyond San Juan Center's airspace, the Silva, which is inside Mike and Tia's airspace. Now let's go northbound from Armour to Crystal, and there's 45 miles between those 2 points. From Crystal, it goes to Alaska, and there's 32 miles between those. And there again, we see Alaska, the namesake of the Alaska Inner Strip Posting Bay for San Juan Center. And then it goes to a fix called Joshi, 84 miles. And we have multiple Lima Airways and preferential routes that take the Airways determination point or starting point is Joshi because of all the traffic that is going to land the San Juan terminal area. Short and to the point. November 779 starts at Silva. Well, the first fix is Silva. Starts at Armour for our purposes. 45 miles to Crystal, 32 miles to Alaska, 84 miles to Joshi, and there you have November 779, the odd man in this group of mics. Good job. You did it. We're done. You drew the map. Wonderful job. It took a couple PowerPoint presentations. We did the ATS routes, Lima routes, Metroplex routes, the mics in that lone November, and now your map probably looks like a line-filled, straightened spaghetti kind of mixture of all different colors and labels and hodgepodge, but you did it. And you should feel proud that you made it this far and drew every airway. There's so many of them. As we said in our first presentation, the airspace is truly unique because it has vestiges of older days with the attempts of new technology for oceanic, and then the Metroplex routes for high density terminal area start and stop points. So you should be proud of yourself. Proud of yourself and take pride in drawing this map anytime you need to do so, whether for practice or for testing purposes or for just general knowledge. It's a great way to get acquainted with the FIR itself by drawing it. It's a very primal way of learning as opposed to looking at it, trying to memorize it, but you yourself being a mapsmith and drawing up these charts. Really proud of you here. Thanks for joining me in this series on the map. We will have one more, not so much to do with the oceanic side, but we will have a domesticated map, one more map that you have to do. But in terms of en route airspace, you're completely done. That would be a separate test in and of itself. And then you would be tested on the domestic side, which we will cover in another video. But for now, revel in your success and enjoy knowing that you did a good job. And hey, draw it again, get back to it. So Steve here, wishing you nothing but the best. Keep those attitudes just like your separation. positive, and I will see you next time.